Hello, students. Let's read the problem. And it says, a canoe rental service charges a $6 transportation fee and $10 an hour to rent a canoe. Which of the following equations best represents y, the cost for renting a canoe for X amount of hours? Okay, so what do we have here? Well, there's no graph, there's no table. Man, this is a tough one. Usually, students have a little bit of a hard time when it comes to word problems, but I'm gonna show you something that maybe can help you understand word problems a little bit easier. Okay, so let's start with the numbers that are given to you. Well, first of all, it says that the canoe charges a $6 transportation fee. Okay, so just for the transportation, they're gonna charge $6. What else do they charge for? Well, they charge $10 an hour just to rent the canoe. Okay, so there's two numbers here. Problem is, I'm not sure who's gonna be the one that is the slope and which one is the y-intercept, miss. Like, that's where I get confused. So if that happens, remember, we're gonna need a slope and y-intercept because I wanna write it down in a slope intercept form, which is right there, y equals mx plus b. So I need to find m, which is the slope, and I need to find b, which is my y-intercept. So let's write it down here. So I need to find a slope and y-intercept. Okay, so I do have two numbers. The problem is that it could be either one, right? It's like, miss, how do I determine? So one of the things that I'm gonna give you as an advice is, why don't you pretend that you're the one who's gonna rent the canoe? Okay, so ask yourself, what happens if I rent the canoe for 1 hour? So I'm gonna write it down right here. What happens if I rent it for 1 hour? Well, you gotta pay the $10, right? Because it's just 1 hour. But you also need to pay the $6 for the transportation. So I need to add up the 6. And I get how much? $16, right? That makes sense? You go rent it for 1 hour. 10 plus 6 makes 16. But now this is where the problem comes. What about if you rent it for 2 hours? Are you going to pay the same thing? No, right? Because it says right here that you pay $10 an hour. So for every hour, you got to pay $10. So if you rent it for 2 hours, how much money you going to pay just for the hours? And I hope that you're saying 20, right? How do I get 20? Well, 10 is for 1 hour. But we're renting it for 2 hours, so I need to write down times 2 plus 6, and that will give me how much? $26. Very good. Okay, but now somebody else comes and they say, well, I actually want to rent it for 3 hours. So what do I do? 3 hours, let me think. 10 for 1 hour, 10 for another hour, and 10 more for another hour. So that makes $30, right? Plus the $6 for the transportation. So how can I represent that? 10 times 3. Because 10 times 3, it's 30. Plus the 6, $36. So this is the total that you pay. Is that right? Okay. So what about if it was 4 hours? Well, 4 hours, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. That's $10. Miss, that's $40. Yes, it is 40, right? Because you multiply 10 times 4. And you still need to add the 6 to that. Because the 6 is for the transportation. Okay? So I'm going to pay how much money? $46. So if you rent it for 2 hours, you pay $26. But if you rent it for 4 hours, you will pay $46. How can I make an equation from there? How can I write it as a y equals mx plus b? Well, let's think about this. The hours, it's the total money that you're going to pay. Is that right? The hours is how many hours am I going to rent it. So if I rent it for 1 hour, if I rent it for 2 hours, so right here, the 2, the 3, and the 4 is the hours. Is that right? And whose hours? And we have it right here. It says X is the amount of hours. Okay, so that's a huge help because 2, 3, and 4 was my hours. So that means that I'm going to multiply 10 times X because that's the per hour. The 6, notice how the 6 never changed. No matter how many hours I rented, I still added only a 6. So that's my y-intercept, okay? And this will be my equation for this. So y is the total cost. Isn't that total cost right to my right? So there's my y right there, okay? So if I write it down as an equation, which I have up here, my y, I'm still going to write down y equals mx. Well, I can see this x right there, and next to the x is a 10. And then I have a plus 6 by itself. So my slope is 10, and my y-intercept is 6, okay? So notice how my slope, 10, it was multiplying the number of hours all the time, right? So that's a huge clue. My slope or my rate of change is the one that actually does something to your x values, okay? So what answer choice looks like my answer over here, guys? Which one do you think? Letter B, right? Very good.